The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed with a hollow timbre, as Zara Johnson pressed herself against the cold, linoleum wall of St. Mary's Hospital. Her small fingers clenched the leather edge of the man's wallet, her breathing ragged, every heartbeat pounding like a warning bell in the deserted corridor. She didn't want more than $500, just enough to keep her mother alive, in the only ward that could save her. But stealing had never been her plan. Still, desperation has a way of stripping away pride. In the shadowed hush, a voice broke through her terror. "How much do you need?" It wasn't the shrill demand of a guard or the furious shout of the aggrieved. It was calm, unexpectedly gentle, and it sent a shock of disbelief through Zara's trembling frame. The owner of the wallet emerged from the half-lit doorway, his tailored suit a crisp contrast against the bleak hospital backdrop. Marcus Wellington, 45, real estate magnate and silent benefactor of half the town's skyline, crossed his arms with an inscrutable poise. He had been watching her for weeks, observing the little girl who never left the waiting room, who scavenged leftovers, who endured the scorn of security guards with bowed head. Yet here he was, saying nothing about alarms, cameras, or the unspoken rule that theft equals punishment. Instead, his eyes held a controlled curiosity that unsettled Zara more than any raised hand could have. "Just tell me how much," he said, voice low but carrying an unmistakable weight of authority. Zara's throat seized. "I didn't mean any harm," she whispered, tears collecting in the corners of her dark eyes. "They said if I don't bring $500 by today, they'll transfer my mother to the public hospital." Her words spilled out. In a rush of shame and fear, public hospital meant worse care, maybe no chance at all. The threat of losing her mother, Zara Johnson, was a fresh wound that bled through every breath. Before she could crumble, Marcus stepped closer, his expression unwavering. He raised one hand in a quiet gesture to stay her panic, then, almost absent-mindedly, pulled out his cell phone. "What's your mother's name?" he asked, as if this were an ordinary inquiry, rather than the hinge of a life-or-death moment. Confusion flickered across Zara's face. "Zara Johnson," she managed, voice cracking with disbelief at how he already knew. In that suspended second, time seemed to fold. Zara's mind raced. Why wasn't he calling security? Why did a billionaire care about her mother's name? And what did he want from her? Marcus pocketed his wallet, then extended his hand with a calculated grace. "Let's make a deal," he said. "I'll cover whatever your mother needs, tuition, treatments, every last dollar. In return, you tell me exactly what Dr. Pierce has been saying to you for the past weeks." His eyes locked onto hers, a promise of salvation mingled with an unspoken demand. Zara's chest tightened. Offers this generous always came at a price. Yet his next words cut deeper. "I suspect your mother is caught in the same scheme that killed my wife in this very hospital 2 years ago." The corridor seemed to hush even further, the walls leaning in to witness the unlikely alliance forming. In their midst, in that moment, Zara realized she hadn't stumbled into a random act of kindness. She had become the first piece on a chessboard that would expose a conspiracy far bigger than either of them could yet imagine. The stolen wallet seen under the harsh glare of flickering fluorescent lights. Zara Johnson pressed herself into the far wall of St. Mary's Hospital's deserted corridor, her chest heaving with each panicked breath. She could taste the metallic tang of fear on her tongue as she stole the leather wallet from the pocket of the man in the immaculate suit. For a moment, time seemed to splinter, the soft click of her sneaker on the tile floor, the distant hum of the hospital's ventilation, the echo of her own ragged heartbeat. She didn't want to be a thief, she merely needed $500 to save her mother's life. But necessity had rinsed away her pride. As she turned to flee, the weight of the billfold in her hands felt like the world on her shoulders. Instead of the expected outrage, Zara found herself frozen by the stranger's unnerving stillness. He did not shout or look for security. He simply leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, his tailored jacket an island of calm in the storm of her desperation. His gaze held an unsettling curiosity that sent a ripple of dread through her spine. He smelled faintly of cedarwood cologne, a rich counterpoint to the antiseptic odor that clung to every corner of the hallway. Zara's fingers tightened around the wallet, her knuckles whitening, and for a heartbeat she wondered if she should drop it and run. Yet something in his steady, unblinking stare rooted her to the spot. This was no ordinary confrontation. First mano a mano. How much do you need? He asked, his voice low and measured, the words slicing cleanly through the chaos in Zara's mind. She blinked once, twice, struck by the absurd gentleness of the question. She had braced herself for anger, for a call to security or worse, but not for charity wrapped in riddles. I didn't mean to steal anyone's things, she managed, voice quavering with a mixture of relief and terror. Tears brimmed in her dark eyes, reflecting the harsh corridor lights like mournful stars. They said if I don't bring $500 today, they'll transfer my mother to the public hospital. She swallowed hard, shame bleeding into every word. Instead of scorn, the stranger's expression softened into something unreadable. He studied her face for a moment, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a smartphone. "What's your mother's name?" he inquired casually, as if requesting a room number rather than a lifeline. Zara's breath caught in her throat. "Sarah Johnson," she whispered, stunned that this man already knew her plight. He nodded as if the answer had been obvious all along, his gaze never wavering from her. In that charged silence, Zara realized her life had pivoted on the edge of a knife. One wrong move, and the steel blade of fate would slash her world apart. **, masking the setup as Zara stood shaking before him. Marcus Wellington's mind drifted back to the day his wife, Elena, had receded behind the frosted glass door of room 315, her final refuge before the hospital's hidden machinery of profit consumed her hope. He remembered the ache in his chest when he discovered the inflated bills, the endless tests that offered no cure, and the cold indifference of the very professionals sworn to heal. That memory fueled the quiet fire glinting in his eyes now. Over the past 3 weeks, he had assumed the role of an inconspicuous visitor, a wealthy benefactor slipping through the hospital's corridors, observing the unspoken suffering of those ignored by Dr. Harrison Pierce and his enablers. He had cataloged every desperate glance Zara threw at passing doctors, every discarded sandwich wrapper she nibbled when hunger gnawed at her frail frame, every trembling plea for attention that vanished into thin air. Today, when she admitted the price tag on her mother's life, the pattern snapped into clarity. Marcus recognized the exact blueprint of the scheme that had stolen Elena's final breaths. Prolonged treatments, levy hidden charges, bleed families until they surrendered completely. He noted the crease between Zara's brows, the curve of her lip as she fought back tears, the way she hugged the wallet like a talisman against oblivion. Each detail was a piece of evidence etched into his memory, strengthening his resolve. This encounter was no accident. It was the hinge upon which justice would swing. He allowed a thoughtful pause, letting the weight of his knowledge settle between them like a silent verdict. The deal sealed in silence. Zara's eyes darted to the exit, as if she could escape her fate, but the stranger's calm authority held her rooted. "Why aren't you calling security?" she demanded, suspicion sharpening her voice. Over the past 2 years, she'd learned that unsolicited help often came with hidden cost. Marcus offered her a slow, deliberate smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Because, Zara Johnson, there's far more at stake here than a stolen wallet," he replied, his tone devoid of accusation yet laced with promise. He reached out and closed the distance between them, extending his hand in an unspoken covenant. "Come with me to room 212. I'll pay whatever it takes to fix this, every procedure, every fee. No questions asked. In return, you tell me exactly what Dr. Pierce has said to you about your mother's treatment these past weeks." Zara hesitated. Trust rarely bloomed in hospital corridors, especially not for a lone girl against an unseen medical empire. Yet, the mention of Dr. Pierce, the man whose cold lectures and empty reassurances had become the soundtrack to her mother's decline, ignited a spark of defiance in her weary heart. She slipped her hand into his, the gesture fragile but determined. Together, they moved down the corridor, each step echoing on the linoleum like a drumbeat heralding a coming battle. The air grew heavier as they neared room 212, as if the oppressive gravity of unspoken truths lay just beyond the door. In that pregnant moment, Zara realized she had traded one prison of fear for another of necessity. And Marcus knew he had unleashed forces within the hospital walls that would not rest until every hidden transgression was dragged into the light. The corridor fell into an uneasy hush, awaiting the next move in a game whose stakes were nothing less than justice. Inside room 212 room 212 felt more like a scene from a medical horror film than a place of healing. The rhythm of Zara's breath hitched as she stepped across the threshold, the glare of overhead lamps revealing Sarah Johnson ensnared in a tangle of tubes and wires. Intravenous lines dripped steadily into her frail arm, while machines whirred and beeped with relentless urgency. A ventilator hissed in time with its own mechanical heartbeat, and multiple monitors blinked out a cascade of numbers neither comforting nor comprehensible. Everything was turned up to an unnecessary crescendo: extra respirators, redundant blood tests, a dozen medication pumps calibrated to administer doses that seemed excessive, even to Zara's untrained eyes. Beneath the antiseptic smell lay a faint undercurrent of burnt plastic and overheated circuits, a reminder that every machine here was a profit center in disguise. Dr. Harrison Pierce swept in like a director stepping onto his stage, his white coat was unblemished, his gray hair combed into a slick-back perfection, and his posture exuded the arrogance of someone born to be obeyed. As he approached Sarah, his lips curved into a practiced smile that never quite reached his eyes. He referred to Sarah as the little problem with theatrical condescension, as though she were a stray child in his carefully orchestrated production. His voice carried the clipped inflections of someone dispensing both judgment and entertainment. Your questions are touching, child, but medicine is a complex art. Trust the professionals and think about how you'll pay for it. At each perfunctory explanation of yet another procedure, he punctuated his remarks with a dismissive laugh, as though reminding himself that his victims were too powerless to challenge him. Watching him deliver his lines, Sarah felt a spark of rage ignite in her chest, the same defiance she glimpsed on Eleanor's face. In her final days, undercover maneuvers Marcus Wellington stood at the perimeter of this performance with a poker face that concealed every ounce of the fury coursing through his veins. He had slipped into the observer role with practiced ease, feigning polite interest in the chart he held, while discreetly activating the recording app on his phone. He had learned long ago that doctors like Pierce revealed their true colors when they believed themselves untouchable. This room, with its hushed lighting and carefully controlled atmosphere, was Pierce's fortress. As the doctor droned on about quality care and necessary treatments, Marcus held himself motionless, lips barely parting, eyes fixated on every twitch of Pierce's smirk. While Pierce held court, Marcus watched Nurse Carol hover nearby, tablet in hand. She took meticulous notes at his behest, but each time the doctor turned away, her fingers trembled over the screen and her eyes darted toward Sarah and Marcus with unspoken dread. The nurse's discomfort was a telltale sign that she suspected something was deeply wrong. Marcus made a mental note of Carol's discomfort, her timing in entering and exiting the room, the slight tremor in her voice when she repeated Pierce's figures, the blue folder she carried under her arm whenever she retreated down the corridor. With each detail he logged, he felt the net tightening around Pierce's scheme. Soon, he would have the corroboration he needed to dismantle this operation from the inside out. Whistleblower Alliance 3 days later, Marcus sat in an unassuming cafe in the city center, the din of clinking espresso cups a stark contrast to the sterile hush of the hospital. Opposite him sat Dr. Jennifer Walsh, her silver-streaked hair pulled into a tight bun, eyes sharp with controlled indignation. 2 years earlier, she had been a respected physician at St. Mary's until she dared to question Dr. Pierce's methods. Her insubordination had led to her dismissal, but it had also set her on a path of relentless investigation. Across the table lay a thick manila folder bulging with photocopied invoices, internal memos, and patient records. Jennifer pushed the folder toward Marcus, her knuckles white against the cardboard. "You have no idea how big this goes," she whispered, leaning forward. "Nurses altering records, accountants inflating charges, patients kept on machines long past any medical necessity. I lost my daughter, and to one of Pierce's experimental treatments. He promised miracles and delivered grief. When I confronted him, when I demanded transparency, they fired me." Her voice wavered for the first time, the ghost of her daughter's memory surfacing in a flicker of pain. Marcus watched her, admiration and sorrow blending in his steady gaze. He understood all too well the cost of speaking truth to power, as she laid out case after case, families who had been bankrupted, patients who died under the pretense of extended care. Marcus felt the weight of a 2-year crusade settle onto his shoulders. Here was the proof he needed to ignite a nationwide reckoning. Zara, the junior detective back within the labyrinth of St. Mary's corridors. Zara had become more than a desperate daughter. She was Marcus's junior detective. Armed with an official visitor's pass Marcus had arranged, she moved freely between wards, her young eyes sharp for any inkling of irregularity. During one of their clandestine walks, Zara whispered, "Mr. Marcus, did you notice Nurse Carol always leaves after Pierce talks? And she's always clutching that blue folder." Marcus nodded, his mind racing. "Exactly," he murmured. "She's carrying the evidence, but she's too scared to speak." Later, as they lingered near the elevator bank, Zara pointed out a heavy wooden door on the 3rd floor, one emblazoned with a corporate seal. "Notice how only people in suits go in, never doctors in scrubs," she said, voice low. "And every Tuesday at 3 p.m., Dr. Pierce meets men there who don't look like hospital staff." The precision in her observation drew a thin smile from Marcus. He saw in her the same tenacity his wife had possessed, the fierce intelligence that refused to accept injustice. He filed away every detail: day, time, badge numbers, even the faint scent of cigar smoke that wafted from behind that sealed door. Together they plotted their next move. Zara would continue to slip into the corridors, gather snippets of overheard conversation, and chart the comings and goings of suits and scrubs. Marcus would coordinate with Jennifer Walsh to cross-reference these observations against the documents in her folder. Their unlikely partnership, Billionaire CEO and 12-year-old sleuth, was poised to expose a medical fraud ring that had operated undetected for years. As Zara led him into a quiet corner, her voice barely above a whisper, Marcus realized that this girl's courage and keen eye were the final pieces of the puzzle. In the ticking stillness of the hospital's secret corridors, they were building a case so airtight that Dr. Pierce's empire of exploitation would soon collapse under the weight of its own corruption. Live on the lobby steps. The sun had barely climbed above the horizon when News Channel 7's satellite truck roared to life in the hospital parking lot. Its cameras trained on the main entrance like prowling predators, families who had once wandered those same glass doors as desperate petitioners now gathered arm in arm, clutching folders, photographs, and medical bills as evidence. The air hummed with murmurs of shared grief and simmering anger, punctuated by the distant whir of camera drones. As the lead reporter, Sarah Mitchell, raised her microphone, Dr. Harrison Pierce emerged, flanked by nervous hospital administrators, his white coat looking more like a shroud than a uniform. He paused at the top of the steps, throat tightening, as he forced a self-congratulatory smile to mask the panic in his eyes. One by one, victims stepped forward into the glare of the spotlights. A mother in her 50s thrust forward a crumpled photo of her daughter, Kesha, once told she needed experimental brain surgery for a concussion gamble that landed the girl in a 6-month coma. A Hispanic father, voice trembling, accused Pierce of turning a routine diabetes check into a kidney failure nightmare that cost him his home. Behind them, dozens more families swelled the crowd, each holding up chart printouts and billing records stained with tears. The hospital's grand facade, once a symbol of trust, now looked like a stage set for a cruel theater of exploitation. Sarah Mitchell leaned forward, inches from Pierce's face, and asked the question that would live in infamy. Dr. Pierce, how do you respond to allegations of systematically overcharging and unnecessarily prolonging treatments for vulnerable patients? The camera zoomed in on Pierce's lips, which quivered before producing a strained denial. His eyes flicked to Marcus Wellington standing a few paces behind a cluster of FBI agents, and for the first time his poise unraveled. The families pressed closer, their unified voices rising in accusation, drowning out Pierce's feeble protestations. Under the relentless gaze of live television, the doctor's terror-stricken face told the story his words could not. Justice was closing in. The arrest within moments. Agent Rebecca Santos stepped forward, badge held aloft like a beacon of accountability. Without a hint of hesitation, she announced, Dr. Harrison Pierce, you are under arrest for medical fraud, conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, and manslaughter. Handcuffs clicked around Pierce's wrist, snapping shut on decades of unchallenged arrogance. The crowds gasped, some wept, as Pierce's once imposing figure was guided down the steps in the custody of federal agents. Marcus Wellington watched from the periphery, expression calm yet suffused with a hard-won satisfaction. This was more than a personal vendetta. It was a moral reckoning for every family crushed under the weight of the doctor's schemes. In the final moments before the rear door of the unmarked FBI van closed, Pierce cast a defeated, pleading glance at Marcus, an unspoken confession of guilt that needed no recording. Victory's price. The fallout was swift. By afternoon, independent physicians had evaluated Sarah Johnson and declared her fit for discharge. The enigmatic millionaire's check had settled every outstanding bill overnight. A temporary victim fund, seated by Marcus Wellington and administered through a newly formed advocacy group, began reimbursing the dozens of families left bankrupt by Pierce's profiteering. News outlets ran follow-up segments on the Johnson family's miraculous reprieve. Zara, clutching her mother's hand, watched as Sarah Johnson was wheeled out in a wheelchair, her eyes bright with disbelief and gratitude. Zara's shoulders, once hunched beneath despair, straightened with relief, and for the first time in weeks, she allowed herself a smile. Marcus, typically the image of composed detachment, let a genuine grin soften his features as he handed Zara a bouquet of white daisies, a token of new beginnings. Seeding the next chapter. 6 months later, the epicenter of the fight against medical malfeasance had moved from sterile corridors to a sleek office tower downtown. Marcus Wellington sat behind a walnut desk in the newly christened Elena Wellington Foundation, named in memory of the wife whose death had ignited this crusade. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a manicured courtyard, where Zara, now 13 and sporting a bright scholarship-funded uniform, led a group of volunteers in sorting documents for the Foundation's next big investigation. Sarah Johnson, fully recovered and serving as the foundation's first case manager, guided families through the labyrinth of medical records with a mother's compassion and insider knowledge. Across the hall, Dr. Jennifer Walsh presided over monthly ethics seminars, her earlier dismissal from St. Mary's now a badge of honor. Under her leadership, transparent treatment protocols had become standard practice in several hospitals statewide, and data tracked by the foundation revealed an 80% drop in unnecessary hospitalizations within the first quarter of their rollout. Word spread quickly. The foundation's model was being studied by medical boards in other states, eager to replicate its success. Local and national media hailed this as a landmark shift in patient advocacy, proving that systemic change was possible when one determined leader refused to remain silent. In a final moment of reflection, Marcus reviewed the foundation's mission statement, his thoughts drifting back to the girl who had swallowed her pride to save her mother, and to the wife whose memory demanded justice. The journey from that hospital hallway to this powerhouse of reform was a testament to the belief that grief could be alchemized into purpose, and that sometimes the most potent weapon against corruption was the unwavering courage of ordinary people united by one extraordinary leader. As he prepared for the next strategic meeting and undercover audit of regional nursing homes, Marcus allowed himself a brief smirk. The takedown of Dr. Pierce had been just the beginning. The real fight for accountability in healthcare was only just unfolding. In the quiet that follows a storm, Marcus Wellington often finds himself replaying the day he first met Sarah. In that echoing hospital corridor, the grief that once threatened to consume him like the slow, merciless drip of a morphine pump has been alchemized into something stronger: purpose. Each time he watches Zara's bright smile light up a room, he remembers Elena's final days and vows that no more families will suffer the way his own did. He thinks of the meticulous recordings, the clandestine meetings, the weight of every document Dr. Jennifer Walsh entrusted to him. What began as a personal crusade to avenge his wife has grown into a movement that challenges corruption at its core. He carries both CEO's decisiveness and a spy's discretion, using boardroom leverage and covert investigation in tandem. In his mind, every victory a discharged patient, a criminal indictment, a policy overhaul is a tribute to Elena's memory and a reminder that grief, when wielded wisely, can become the engine of change. The unlikely partnership between a powerful tycoon and a brave 12-year-old has proven that courage knows no age or title. Zara, once trembling behind stolen wallets and whispered fears, now stands at the forefront of the Elena Wellington Foundation, guiding newly arrived families through the maze of medical bureaucracy. Their bond transcends the typical mentor-mentee dynamic. It is forged by shared loss and mutual determination. Marcus sees in Zara the same tenacity that saved him from despair, and she sees in him the unwavering protector she never knew she needed. Together, their alliance reshapes the narrative of victimhood into one of empowerment. The world has taken notice. Communities once resigned to silent suffering now rally to demand transparency. News headlines celebrate the drop in unnecessary hospital stays. Grassroots groups spring up in towns where Dr. Pierce's influence once reigned unchallenged. Kindness and strategy have become twin weapons for ordinary people facing extraordinary injustice. If you believe that one voice can topple corruption, that even a single act of empathy can trigger a tidal wave of accountability, then join us. Like this video, share it with friends, and subscribe to our channel to stay at the forefront of corporate truth-seeking. Your support amplifies every whistleblower's courage and every family's plea for justice. And this is only the beginning. Episodes will take us beyond hospital walls, into the heart of Wall Street's opaque machinations. Watch as our undercover CEO trades spreadsheets for stealth, exposing financial schemes that bleed Main Street dry. Stay tuned, and remember, in the battle against systemic wrongdoing, silence is complicity. Will you raise your voice?